friends, Diana here from Garden Love. Today we're bringing you an episode about how to water fruit trees in containers. As you guys can see here, there's 3 examples that I have here. There's a lot of things to consider when it comes to watering fruit trees in containers, and I want to bring some of those things to your attention so that way you can kind of evaluate, because there's not one specific way on how to water your fruit trees in containers, because a lot of areas come into play, and I want to bring this to your attention. That way you can take a look at your location, your container, where you live, and what kind of climate and weather you're in, what kind of size of fruit tree you have versus your container, such as this one versus that container. And I just want to elaborate a little bit about that, just so you guys can have an idea on what to consider, and you can make your own judgment call when it comes to watering your fruit trees in containers. I call it the process of elimination, and I do that with all of my fruit trees. I consider everything that's going on, and I go through the process of, like, could it be the soil, could it be the container that it's in, can it be the location where it's in, it could be so many things, and I want to just elaborate a little bit about that. And I want to start with your weather, because I feel like I don't talk about this enough for you guys to consider, because I do live here in sunny California, so our weather is always hot, it's always dry, we don't get a lot of rain. So therefore, when I water my plants more often, it's because there is no rain and it's very dry, and we get a lot of wind. We have a lot of wind today. I don't know if you guys can hear it. I hope this video you can hear my voice very well. There's a lot of wind, which is just as bad as a dry season. It's just as bad as being 110 degrees here, because the wind will dry out your soil, especially if you don't have mulch protecting your soil. So I want you to consider that. Think about, what location am I at? Do I get a lot of rain? Or do I get a lot of wind? Or is it super, like you're in a desert where it's 115 degrees, 110 degrees? Those are things to consider when it comes to watering your fruit trees in container, okay? So obviously, if you are in a rainy place, A, you're gonna wanna not water your fruit trees in container. 2, you're going to want to make sure that the soil that you put your fruit trees in is very, very well draining, okay? So let's break it down. Now that we understand our weather plays such a big role of how often to water your fruit trees in container, now you want to consider what kind of container are you going to put your fruit trees. There's about three to four types of containers that you can put your fruit trees in. One, it could be a wooden barrel like this one. It's like a wine barrel size, and it's wooden, so that's not going to retain as much water as a container that is in a plastic, such as this one and that one. That's actually a plastic container that looks like a wine barrel, and it retains more moisture, okay? Or there is some other different plastic ones that you can also use. And then we have the terracotta kind, and then there's the terracotta that has no glaze. So the terracotta will actually be more useful in a place where you get a lot of rain, because it drains faster and it's porous and it dries faster. So that definitely helps you if you're in that area. Now, if you're in a super hot place in a desert, I would highly recommend a more like a plastic container, because it helps retain the moisture. Now, if you're in between, you can use a wooden one. This one is like the in-between one. It holds some moisture, but not that much, and it doesn't drain as fast as a terracotta, but it's still, you know, it's right in between. I'm lucky enough that here in sunny California, I'm able to use any of them. I just have to keep an eye on it, you know, let's talk about the location, because not just where you live and where the weather is, it's also going to be the location where you place your tree. If you place your tree in a sunny place where you know it's going to get sun the whole entire day, that's something to consider. It's probably going to want more water, because it's drinking more, it's getting more dehydrated more often. So it's definitely something to consider. Now, if you put it in a shady area where it doesn't get as much sun, then it's obviously not going to need as much water. So that's one thing to consider. Another thing to consider, okay? So it's very important. Now, the soil, also when it comes to the soil, I'm going to make a completely separate video when it comes to the soil, and I've purchased some soils to compare and give you guys examples, because that also plays a big role, which soil you use to where you live. Because like I mentioned, if you live in a rainy area, you're going to want a soil that completely drains very, very well. And then if you live in a hot area like me, you're gonna want something that holds a little bit more moisture, but fruit trees do not like to sit in water, so you also want drainage, but you want it to hold a little bit more moisture. And I'll explain all of that in the next video I make when it comes to comparing soils and showing you guys what I prefer versus what other products are out there, and what works for me might work for you, but also what doesn't work for me might work for you as well. So there's a lot of things to consider. Hi Lily. There's a lot of things to consider when it comes to soil, so I want to do a completely separate video about that. Now, let's talk about the size of the tree versus, you know, the size in the container. Now, another thing, there's when you have a small tree like this and there's plenty of soil in there, like it's not root bound, it's not going to need water as often as you think it does. I'm going to let the wind die down a little bit because I want to make sure that my voice comes through with the video. So if you, this is a seedling from a low pot from last year, from last season, and I know there's plenty of soil in here, and I know it doesn't need as much water as often because it's not completely root bound, which means that some of the soil in there is holding moisture while the roots get to it. Okay, now if you have a more mature tree like this in a wine barrel that you know it has already exceeded, the roots have exceeded the needs of, you know, the how do I say this, so the roots are basically root bound. Basically, there's more roots in there than there is soil, so it's going to drink up the water a lot more often, and there's not enough soil in there to actually retain moisture for it to sit around for this tree to drink it. So I'm going to have to water this tree a lot more often than I would have to water this little seedling, because I know there's plenty of soil in there that's holding the water for the seedling, whereas this one, I know most of what's in that container is roots. So that's another thing to consider, okay? It's very important that you evaluate, well, there's plenty of soil in there that's holding moisture versus something that's more root bound. And this definitely has to be either one, potted or root prune, and add a little bit more fresh soil, or I'm gonna have to put it in the ground. If you guys been watching my video, you guys know that I want to go ahead and put this in the ground, and I'm gonna be putting a lot of my trees in the ground and getting new trees into containers, allowing them to grow, and then eventually I'm gonna figure out what to do with them. Now, let's see here. There were so many things that I wanted to talk to you guys about, so that I want to make sure that I get it. Let's see, let me think. I think I covered a lot of it. It was very, I wanted to make sure that I broke it down, and everything that I mentioned to you guys about watering, that it wasn't just what applies to me. I want to know that you guys, there's a lot of people from the East Coast that you guys follow me. I really appreciate that. I wanted to give you guys kind of like an overview of what's going to help you water your fruit trees in containers. I always mention to add mulch because that helps retain the moisture in here. Choosing the right container and the right size for what tree, that's another video I want to make. Please give me a thumbs up, consider subscribing if you're new to this channel, leave me a comment if you're interested in knowing how to select the right size of container for your fruit tree, because that makes a big difference when it comes. You can't just put this tree into a container that size, because it's just not gonna work, and I'll explain in details in the next video. Because you want it to be successful, you want it to be the right size for it. And when it comes to watering, another tip I want to give you guys, putting your finger inside the soil and seeing if you get some soil stuck to your finger, that means there's moisture. That means that it's good. You know, you don't have to water at the very moment, but if you stick your finger and it's completely dry, that's a way to determine whether your tree needs water or not. So that's basically the easiest way, okay, to determine. Now, you can hand water, you can set up a drip irrigation, which I'm so excited. I just recently learned more about irrigation, and I'm going to share those tips and everything I learned with you guys here pretty soon, because I set up my whole irrigation system with the help of someone, and I've learned so much, but that's a whole nother story. But yes, you can hand water, you can set up a drip irrigation. Some people have put like a string with a bucket of water, and then just the tree sucks the water through the string, which I've never tried it. I'm curious about that. If you guys have tried that, please leave it in the comments down below and let me know. I guess Lily wants to join us. She wants to be part of the video. We're almost done here. I feel like that's basically the gist of watering your fruit trees. When you guys have, let's see, some small fruit, you gotta have to be checking your fruit to make sure that it doesn't never dry out completely, because you want your tree to retain that fruit. You want your tree to be happy and not start dropping leaves, not start dropping fruit. So during the time that it's flowering, I don't know if you guys can tell, there's a lot of little flowers here. During that time when it's flowering, you're gonna have to make sure that the tree is getting adequate water. Water is so important when it comes to fruiting and flowering, okay? So just keep an eye on it. Like I mentioned in all my videos, add mulch to it. This tree definitely needs mulch, so I'm going to be adding some to it. And that's really what I wanted to share with you guys, because I know there's a lot of information when it comes to watering. There's a lot of things to consider. Let's go through it. Let's see. Let's go through everything we just talked about. That way I'm know that I pointed everything out. So you have where you live, what kind of weather you are in, whether you have a lot of rain or a lot of wind or a lot of super high temperatures. Okay, so consider that when it comes to how often you need to water. Oh yes, I just remember one thing before we go down the list. I gotta tell you one thing. When it comes to fruit trees, some trees drink a lot more water than others. Okay, for example, my pink guava, that tree, it's root bound. It's gonna have to go either into a bigger container or it's gonna have to go into the ground. Okay, so guavas love to have moist soil. Okay, they love to have a lot of water and they love to drink. You have to also consider what kind of fruit tree you have, because when it comes to the fruit tree, some like to drink more than others. Okay, so if you know that that type of tree likes to have more water, you're gonna have to water more often. Even if the soil feels a little moist, it might want some more water, especially when it's windy and when it's super hot. Okay, so weather plays such a big role when it comes to watering your fruit trees in containers. For example, loquats are considered drought tolerant. So even though it doesn't have mulch and it's a little root bound, it's still holding on to the fruit. That's why I'm not freaking out and I haven't put mulch and I don't water as often as, maybe I should, because they're very, heat tolerance and they're very drought tolerance, which means that this tree is going to be just fine. I'm not too worried about it, but lemon trees like to drink water, especially when they're fruiting and when they're flowering. So you got to also consider the type of tree that you have. Okay, I'm glad I didn't forget to say that, because I knew that I had to say it and I was like, I don't feel like I've mentioned everything, because that plays such a big role. Okay, so we talked about location, your weather where you live, the location where you're actually setting your container. Okay, not just the location where you live, but where in your property are you setting the container, because there is microclimates in every location in your property. Okay, so back there might be cooler weathers, okay, and maybe the wind doesn't hit back there. Right here it might get more sun. Over here it gets more shade because of this ginormous oak tree right above me. So there's a lot of things to consider when it comes to microclimate. Okay, so it's not just your location where the state that you live in, is also the microclimate, the location of your property, wherever it is that you're going to place your tree. Okay. Let's see here. So what else did we need to say? The soil, make sure that you know what kind of soil you have in there. Some soil might retain more moisture than others, so you don't have to water as often. The container, the type of container, whether it's plastic or terracotta, then whether it retains more moisture or not. Let's see here. I think that pretty much covers it all. I hope that I was able to tell you guys a little bit of everything that you need to consider when it comes down to your fruit trees, because it's so important. It's not just one shoe fits all. You have to consider the type of fruit tree that you're putting in, the container that you're putting it in, where you're putting it in, what kind of weather do you have, and that's pretty much it, guys. I feel like I mentioned everything. I'm so excited that you guys are here. I know you guys requested this video, and I think it's a very important video because there's a lot of things to consider and a lot to think about, and I just want you to go through the list of everything that we talked right here and just do a process of elimination if you're having any issues with your tree, and figure out what is it that you are doing for your fruit tree. Like maybe the leaves keep falling off and you think I need to water it more. but in actuality maybe it's not draining well and it's waterlogged, because the leaves can fall either by not watering it, or they can fall by having too much water. So there's those things that you need to consider. Go through the list of everything we talked about if you're having any issues, and just figure out maybe I didn't mention how important it is to have wall draining containers. So you want to make sure that you do a lot of holes in there, because remember, once it's in there, it's going to be harder for you to add more holes. You can always water more often, but it's not easy to drain it once the water's in there. So make sure that any containers that you use for your fruit trees, whether there's plastic, wood, terracotta, glazed terracotta, you want to make sure that you have enough holes in that container, because you want it to drain. No matter what weather you are in, you want to make sure that you drain your container, okay? And I do want to talk about how to pot it in a different video, and what container to choose and what size container to choose. Like, what size would I choose for this tree? We'll talk about it, because I feel like I just gave you guys an overload of information that I feel would be helpful. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and like always guys, I feel so blessed to have you guys here. I hope you guys have a blessed day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.